gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
The FDA is about to get a lot more muscle.
More money and more power.
Sweeping new powers.
The most sweeping overhaul of the nation's food safety laws since the 1930s.
Robert Scott Bell.
How did the Department of Homeland Security get into the medical business?
Joe, we have a potential pandemic.
A national health emergency.
The sky is falling! A piece of it just hit me on the head!
Robert Scott Bell.
The average citizen, if they did what the TSA agents do, would be arrested.
Would you submit to one of these pat-downs?
Not if I could avoid it. No, I mean, who would?
If you touch my junk, I'm going to have you arrested.
Enough is enough.
Taking on bureaucrats and corporations that would stand in the way of health freedom and making sense out of medical propaganda. The voice of health, freedom, and liberty, Robert Scott Bell.
This hour on the Robert Scott Bell Show, we're going to take the healing revolution in a direction we've been building this week. Wednesday, we started covering it. Yesterday with Liam and Terry Michael, we covered it. We all speculated a lot about what was happening with Lindsey Nagel's son, little Rico, Baby Rico, SaveRico.com. We've got the website linked up as well. Today, we actually have Grandma and Grandpa on. Can I call you that? Steve and Lindsey Nagel. I'm sorry, Steve and Cheryl are here now. And I appreciate you guys. You know, we go a bit back in the coverage of the story of Lindsey as well. And when we heard about this, my heart was just aching for all of you in this. And I want you to, if you can, roll us back to the beginning when you had Lindsey had a 22, very healthy, vital. You know, the times I saw her as a teenager, very strong and vital and bubbly and alive, just like any teenager, very spirited, right?
Yep.
And now 22 has a baby. And I guess the question is, what happened and how did it happen? And then Liam will join us in a moment. But again, welcome, Cheryl. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us on.
Yep, we adopted Lindsey, 22 years ago. And when she came back to America, she was adopted from Romania. So when we came back to America, she had a whole battery of tests. One of them was for HIV. And she tested positive here, where she tested negative in Romania just a few weeks earlier. So then we were anxious to put her on the drug of the day, AZT, and she was on it for almost 22 months. And at the end of that time, during the time, we didn't know it, but she was lagging behind on her growth charts, and she wasn't kind of keeping up with the normal curve. But at the end of the 22 months, she had such severe pain and cramping in her legs that she was waking up every single night. And I called the doctor numerous times about that, and she would, her infectious disease doctor, and she said, it's just the HIV, it's just the symptoms, the side effects of being HIV positive. And we just about went ballistic. And because it was so irritating and so painful to watch our little baby going through this. So earlier, this was back in 1992, and Lindsey was almost 2 years old. Earlier that summer, we had read an article written in the National Review about Peter Duesberg. And he's a world-renowned retrovirologist who, in that article, stated that he didn't even think HIV caused AIDS. And furthermore, he explained that AZT, the drug that Lindsey was on, will kill you, and it mimics. It kills cells randomly, and that's probably what's causing Lindsey's pain. So when she started having that pain, we reflected back on that article, and we wrote to Peter Duesberg right away. He still is a scientist instructor at Berkeley, California, And
Yeah,
so
we've interviewed Professor Duesberg many times as well here, and we've talked about this. And I want to also reference, for if you're new to the show and you want to hear more or visually see the backstory, it's included, perhaps one of the more profound stories among many, in House of Numbers, which we've covered here as well. So you find this out, and you decide, and Steve, you're there, you're looking at this. This is a tough decision, because everything says somebody has HIV, they're going to die of AIDS, you got to put them on the drugs. And so you come to the conclusion both that it would, at this point, if she's going to die, she's in so much pain, I would rather have her die without the pain. So you pull her off the drugs, even though all the doctors are saying that's a death sentence.
Well, that's really what it boiled down to. It wasn't, this started looking more like a poisoning than it did, some type of a disease or anything. I kind of go with my world experiences, and this just didn't fit into a disease. We'd watched Kimberly Bergalis publicly die on TV with saliva running out of the sides of her mouth, and it's just, when we sized everything up and saw the direction Lindsey was going, that literally was what I felt. I felt that I would rather that Lindsey have 6 good months than 2 bad years. It's, whose purpose is being served by simply keeping somebody alive?
Sure, you can. A parent can know that suffering first and foremost in firsthand. Somebody outside maybe not understand that decision, but the great and fantastic news is not only did she get out of the suffering, but she began to become healthier. Her growth began to normalize as well. A lot of her abilities all coming back, and of course, she lived. She didn't die. And this is the story takes an unusual turn here, is that you had found out that there were a number of other children who were adopted from Romania that had also tested positive for HIV up there in the Minnesota area, and all of them had remained on the drugs. And what happened to all of them?
Well, actually, they weren't. Lindsey was the only one that was adopted from Romania. Back in that time, AZT had not been cleared for use with children, but they did have a protocol that the doctor that we were seeing, she oversaw the protocol for AZT, and she was out of Children's Hospital here in Minnesota. And at that time, there were 12 children that were listed in the same condition as Lindsey. It was a 12 total for the whole state of Minnesota. There weren't a lot of them. Most of this was breaking on the 2 coasts. It wasn't in Midwestern America. So we were put in contact, whether they were with their families or with their foster families, because a lot of these children were born to drug users, and they had some other underlying condition that Lindsey didn't have, but we got to know them kind of as a support group. So when we got off from the AZT, we kind of fell back out of the group because we felt we were, we had split apart from them, and we didn't want to influence their decisions, but this was our decision. And as we watched stories come up in the newspaper, it was heavily covered at that time, we just watched them all die off, and the longest any of that group lived was to be 6 years old. So out of the 12, 11 of them died, and Lindsey's the only one still alive.
Well, this reference is something, and Liam, are you with us?
I am here.
Liam Scheff is back. We were talking about this on yesterday's program, Liam, that we speculated that because Lindsey lived, this really was a black eye to the AIDS or HIV establishment, and that there might be retaliation one day, and that'll bring us, to almost to the present day. But I thought it was important to visit the story again, so when we understand the next generation coming out and what has transpired today, you have this backstory.
Well, again, 12 children, all given AZT. One taken off AZT, one of them lives. You don't really have to be a statistician or a pharmacist to understand what's happening here.
Oh, dear.
They give people poison and they die, and that's what happened. And the Nagels had the courage and insight to stop because they have a very good common sense approach. They observe. That's what scientists should do. They observe a child in pain. They observe the child in pain as a result of this bloody medication, and they say, well, let's read about the medication. Oh, look at that. It has a black box label on it from the FDA saying that it's harmful, fatal if swallowed. And we're giving it to a child. I guess we're going to not give it to the child anymore. Oh, look at that. The child is growing and not in pain anymore. When we talk about what's happening now, Robert, I want to pay special attention to the coded language that the media uses.
Yes, that is very important, because the way we're handling it here, and Gary Null handled it, and any alternative new media type sites, is going to be distinctly different, and people should notice the difference and maybe even understand why. And it can be, let's say, an alert as well. Not that the Nagels are unfamiliar with dealing with the media, because they did, all those years ago. But things may have shifted to some degree, some things may have not, so I want to navigate that with you.
Oh, let's go. Let's jump. I don't know if we're hitting a break, but let's jump into the current crisis.
Yeah, so a couple of minutes before the first break, I want to set the stage now, Steve and Cheryl. We have now Lindsey at 22, has a baby. Now, she has the baby in a hospital. We're going to get to the controversy of that and what that brought about. But was there any concern that you knew of going in, or was this something that they had planned, she and her fiancé John, just to have it like a lot of Americans now? They just automatically go to a hospital.
We had no clue that they were going to kind of lynch us there, because I started going with Lindsey to every single doctor's appointment. There was a midwife we would see every month. And I even went with her into the little curtained area where you are weighed, because I didn't want anyone talking to her all by herself. And the very first time we went in, they offered to do a whole battery of tests, which included an HIV test. And Lindsey said, "No, I don't wish to have that one." So there an eyebrow was raised, and that nurse, kind of beat it out of us why we didn't want the test done. And Lindsey said, "I already know I'm positive, so there's no need to do the test." And then we explained to her about House of Numbers and that we were involved in all this stuff. And that was the one and only time that HIV was ever brought up in all of those midwife visits until the day Rico was born.
Well, that was then the opening, I suppose, to some other things, because we had wondered about how the word got out. We're talking with Steve and Cheryl Nagel, the grandparents of little baby Rico. SaveRico.com is the website we want you to check out. The ongoing saga of Lindsey and John, their son, Rico, now, let's say, taken possession by the state, by the county, in the hospital, being forced to either ingest or by tube. We'll get word on that. Very dangerous drugs that are toxic enough to kill a healthy person. They're giving it to this baby. Why? What was this baby's crime? Was this baby diagnosed by any mechanism that can be definitively identified, acknowledged, and validated? When we come back from this break, we'll continue. Liam Scheff and I will continue talking with Steve and with Cheryl. Very serious topic this hour on the Robert Scott Bell Show to wrap up the week. So stand by. Lots more healing to go after this.
Live around the world. The Robert Scott Bell Show. It's the Robert Scott Bell Show.
The story of Baby Rico now. SaveRico.com. Check it out through the links as well at RobertScottBell.com. Liam Scheff is here with me. We're talking with Steve and Cheryl Nagel, the grandparents, and, of course, the parents, adopted parents of Lindsey Nagel. And this story is intriguing. It's heart-wrenching. It just gets me deep inside when I see a child being poisoned this way, especially for no apparently real diagnostic reason, as this child was born in the hospital with midwives. But at some point, we just learned one of the nurses involved found out about the whole history, and that may have set the stage for what was to happen next. So now do we leap forward to the birth and then suddenly it all goes out of hand, Liam?
Well, one point.
Yeah.
She didn't find out. You guys told her point blank. And if there's any moment in this crisis that I imagine you wish you could take back, it would be that moment. Correct? No?
Well, it's hard to know what really went on behind the scenes, because we went for 9 months, never heard anything, but yet Lindsey's records were in Mayo Clinic, and I know we had done some, Lindsey had gone in for something at a clinic, Park Nicollet in Minneapolis, that we had never been at before. They pulled up her records and right away asked what's this HIV thing? When that was when she was 15 years old. So it's hard to believe that they didn't know what was going on all along, even though they didn't tell us that they knew. And then when Lindsey gave birth, this was, Lindsey called me at 5:50 in the morning, because I was opening the restaurant, and said, Dad, I just had the baby, and everything's okay. And I said, great. I said, I'm going to be leaving here in about a half hour when the other cook gets here, and I'll be over there. Well, I hung up the phone, and less than 15 minutes later, Cheryl calls me and said, and she couldn't hardly talk. She says, we've got big problems with HIV over here, and they're demanding that the baby and Lindsey be tested. So one of two things had to have happened here. Either they stayed quiet about it all the time, which is my theory, or they illegally test all babies without permission as soon as they're born at Mayo Clinic. One of those two things had to have happened. And I'll let Cheryl take off from, what happened right after the birth, because I wasn't there, although I dropped everything, locked the restaurant, and I was there in about 40 minutes. So, Cheryl, you can take off with what happened right after the birth.
When Rico was born, he had meconium. They could tell that he would have meconium issues. And he also had a pneumo, which they couldn't tell, of course, till they examined him closer. But he was whisked right away from Lindsey over to a bassinet that's in the room where they could do their work on him to get him to breathe properly. And it was terribly painful for him to breathe because his pneumo was taking up quite a bit of space between his chest wall and his lung. So once they determined that he had a more serious problem than just being born, they took him down the hallway and said, we'll be back in a while. So here we are. I'm standing there with John, Lindsey's fiancé, and Lindsey, wondering, where's the baby? Just gone. So just about that time, a swarm of people came in the room. I'm sure there was at least 4. I mean, maybe there was more. It seemed like the whole room was full of people, but I'm sure there was only 4, or at least 4. And the spokesman for the group said, I understand there's an HIV issue here. And I'm going, oh, my God. I didn't even know what to say. But he started in, and he was pretty well-versed in his little speech. And he said, you should have told us this before. And I'm going, I didn't even know what to say. But finally, I stood up from my chair, and I put my hands up like, back off, buddy. Mm-hmm. I said, my daughter has just given birth here. Could we talk about this somewhere else? And we took it out to the hallway. But, I told him I don't want to hear about HIV at all. You haven't brought it up this whole time. Why are you doing this now? And he thought that he was implying that that he might have some serious problems because Lindsey was HIV positive.
Well, let me intervene for just a moment here, Cheryl. Mm-hmm. And when you said they took the baby out of your sight, this is for everyone else listening. If for whatever reason you still feel you need to go to a hospital or a birthing center that's even within a hospital, never, ever, and I mean this, ever let that baby out of your physical sight or possession. Okay?
Well, we had John. Yep, John did go down the hall with the baby, but he wasn't with us anymore.
Was he versed enough to know some of the things? See, this is the thing. They play that game just like you acknowledge. They come in with the white lab coats, the intimidation factor, and you're very vulnerable. The husband, the father, is also very vulnerable in these situations. Of course, everybody is. It's an emotional time.
Absolutely. And poor John, he's just a young man. He just does what more or less they tell you to do. So he was all upset. And then he came back to our room, the birthing room, and said, well, now I think they're taking the baby over to the children's NICU ward because it's going to have to be here a while. And we're going, what's a while? A week, a month, 2 years, So finally a doctor did come down. He was a pediatrician. And he did not know, he didn't talk to us anyway about the HIV. He just told us and informed us very nicely about the meconium and the pneumothorax issue. Mm-hmm. So we understood why the baby was being taken to another ward, in fact, in a separate building. And so we started packing up our stuff, and Lindsey wanted to, take a shower and whatever. So we were moved down to another room then eventually in the hospital. But that by then Steve had arrived, so we could kind of tell him everything that happened, and it was just horrifying. It was not what I pictured as a baby being born.
Right. Now, yesterday, Liam and I discussed, also with Terry Michael, the fact that you've got humoral immunity from the mother, that basically every baby in America or anywhere else would likely test positive on the nonspecific cross-reactive, no standard HIV test, which they all are. And in that case, how do you throw something back at it in that moment when they're the so-called experts or they're the power players in the situation and the relationship, what's going on, when they assume control of this baby under the guise of trying to save its life? This is as difficult a situation as ever. That's why I say don't ever enter it if you can avoid it. But this shall be a lesson for everybody. In the meantime, we've got a very active situation still going on here to save this baby. But getting this backstory is very important for people to understand, because there's more at stake on all the babies that are coming afterwards as well. So where are we right now? What do we need to assess? Where do we need to go? Liam, I want you to chime in on this.
Well, the Nagels understand the playing field, and I believe that there's been some progress. I just want to say one more time, if they ask you in the hospital if you're HIV positive, don't answer. Shrug your shoulders. No, I don't. No, don't, because there is no test for it. You could refer them to, you could ask them what they mean, or, tell them that you're not familiar with the concept or something. Just sort of shrug your shoulders. But the fact that the fact that Lindsey said, "Oh, I already know I am," don't hand them anything. And listen, the Nagels have been through this in their minds 1,000 times, like everything and yeah, I believe you guys were set up. I mean, the AIDS industry has an elephant's memory, and you humiliated them. The current writing in the newspaper states that Lindsey, who was given this make-believe diagnosis when she was born, or one, was healed from her injuries from AZT thanks to her mom and dad, the Nagels, who adopted her and cared for her correctly and with great love. The 11 other children died. Now, the mainstream doesn't report that. So when they report the story, they say Lindsey Nagel, who claims she's in good health. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 22 years later. She's just claimed.
Yeah.
That's a 22-year claim. How dare she claim that 22 years later? But when they cite the mainstream AIDS expert, the Jacknape says something like, well, there are no controversies here. There are no controversies here. Well, of course that's a lie. There are 10 million controversies here. And they know. They look up House of Numbers, they go, "Oh, we're in trouble." And then they probably call the NIH or somebody, and they get their marching orders. "Oh, you have them in custody?" They call Darth Vader. "Oh, you have Obi-Wan on the Death Star? Okay, don't let him off." You think I'm kidding. But these people have a long institutional memory, and they make a very pointed attempt to destroy anybody who hurts their credibility. And Lindsey Nagel hurt their credibility because she's evidence, number one, that AZT is poisonous, number two, that HIV tests don't work, number three, that the rest of what they say is a lie. So on that note, where are you guys now?
Well, Rico is, I guess we didn't get to the point of, we finally did get Rico back home. Rico had air feed down through his mouth for, 4 or 5 days, and it's very critical for newborns to start doing everything they need to do right as soon as they're born. So he had kind of lost the ability to feed. So they put a nose feed down through, I don't have all the technical terms, but anyway, it went through his nose down into his stomach, and they were feeding him that way. And then Lindsey was also supplementing with breastfeeding. And after a period of time, and Cheryl probably knows all these.
After about 10 days, she started breastfeeding him, and we had a really neat breastfeeding specialist come in every day. And pretty soon, Rico was weaned away from the nose tube thing and strictly drank from Lindsey's breast, which was fabulous. It was a great thing, and the nutritionist was very happy because Rico really liked breastfeeding. And so I stayed with Lindsey, and John stayed with Lindsey a couple nights in the hospital, almost a whole week between the two of us, and we fed Rico. We woke up every 2 hours, all night long and all day long. We fed him every 2 hours, and he loved it, and he was growing, just exactly what he's supposed to be doing. And they finally released him then to our custody, with Lindsey and John, on January 10th. And it was really great having him home. I remember just sobbing my eyes out and thinking, oh, thank God he's home. We're over the hump. Well, that was a joke.
Well, this is where the story does take a turn. We got to take a break. We're going to come back and say, how did this take a turn for the worse, as things seem to be improving very rapidly at this point? So stand by. We've got that and a whole lot more. Liam Scheff is with me, and we are talking with the grandparents of little Rico. And SaveRico.com is the website, and we'll be back with Steve and Cheryl after this break.
The Robert Sauber.
So we've established Baby Rico is now feeding, eating well, getting stronger, growing, back home. Sounds like everything's going well, but that came to a crashing change at that moment, Cheryl. Right.
Well, what I didn't tell you earlier is that the day Rico was born, we were all sitting in a after-birth room, where you just rest and recover. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Lindsey still had not slept for 30 hours. So she was laying on the bed resting, and these three figures appeared in her room, and they just walked in. It was a doctor, a lawyer, and a social worker. And the doctor said, Lindsey, we know you're HIV positive, or if you are, whatever, you need to be tested, because I don't know. They acted like they weren't sure if she was or not, even though we had told them she was. And if you don't agree to be tested and have Rico tested as well, we're going to put him in foster care right now, because I am going to have my lawyer here call Mauer County, which is where we live, and have them initiate a case against you, and you will be charged with child endangerment. And Lindsey, bless her heart, laying there in the bed with three people staring at her, said, no, I don't want to do it. So the lawyer turned on his heels and started dialing his cell phone as he left the hospital room and left us there.
Wow.
And Steve said, don't we even get 10 minutes to think about this?
Right.
Come on. I mean, the poor kid, Lindsey's laying there under duress and just...
that leads me to believe what Liam is saying is absolutely accurate. They had this stage set, if that happened at that moment in time, because social workers got to know better than this. They're trained to know better. I wish it was a joke, but it's a sick joke. A doctor, a lawyer, and a social worker walk into, you know what I'm saying? This is brutal. Now, we come back to the point that you're home, Rico's growing, the breastfeeding's going well, something went wrong.
Yep. Well, it turns out that Steve called the lawyer back. We had the nurse call him on his phone, and Steve said, we'd like to discuss this with you. And then the four of us talked amongst ourselves and agreed that we better go ahead and have Lindsey and Rico tested. So we did. And then Steve while he was on the phone with the attorney, he said, I want you to tell me now, give me your word that you are dropping this case with Mauer County. And the lawyer said, yes, Steve, you have my word. It's dropped.
But did you have a lawyer present in any of these negotiations?
No. No.
No, these people had been up for almost 40 hours at this point.
Yeah.
John, Lindsey, Cheryl, and during that 40 hours, Lindsey had given birth.
That's a height of vulnerability. This is, this is sickening what they do, what they've done to you all. All right. So, at what point then do they take possession of the baby, put him back in the hospital, and now get him on these so-called AIDS, HIV medicines?
Well, he had always been on the medicines. We'd never taken him off. But on January 17th, which was a Thursday, I got a telephone call from John. They were up north of the Twin Cities, and Moore County Child Protection had called him and demanded to see the baby take the medicine within a half hour. Well, John didn't know what to do, so I called them back. This was about 6 o'clock at night. I said, this is impossible. I said, they're north of the Twin Cities. I said, you can come back down tomorrow and witness it, but it's not physically possible to do that. So they agreed, and so John talked to them in the morning, and they said, well, can we come out at 3 o'clock and witness you giving the child meds at that time? And John said, yeah, that's fine. So all of us were here. Our lawyer demanded to be here, which I thought, why do we need a lawyer here to watch or have him watch them watch the baby take the medicine? Because our lawyer's from Twin Cities, so it's not like I want to spend $200 an hour to drive him down here and back. But I said, okay, you be down here, and luckily he was. They arrived at 3 o'clock, and the social worker that we had come to know, and he'd been very friendly with us, said he understood the whole situation, got out of the car, and so did a sheriff's deputy. Well, the lawyer said, well, that's not really strange, because sometimes they just travel with deputies because they're out in strange situations. So we just kind of sat back. They walked in. The social workers pulled out a chair at the table and sat down. The sheriff slapped 2 pages. It was page 5 and 6 of I don't know if you'd call it a warrant or what it was, but it was the judgment from the judge saying that we are taking the baby right now. They didn't want to see him take the meds or anything. They literally took the baby away from the breast and the only food source that baby had and marched him out the door.
Now, your lawyer couldn't stop this from happening.
No, he said, where's pages 1, 2, and 3? Because that's where the meat of the story's at, where the charges are on page 1.
Right.
He said, we don't know. We'll see if we can get them to you. We didn't get those until, it was Martin Luther King Day the following Monday. So they took him on a Friday. It was and they have 72 hours to have a hearing. Well, 72 hours doesn't count weekends and Martin Luther King Day. So we didn't get the front pages of those papers or know where that baby was at until Wednesday on January
again,
23rd.
This is obviously a well-orchestrated event. This is not something that was just kind of casually came about.
Mm-hmm. No, it's pretty drastic when you take a child away from its only food source, because that child could not feed on a bottle very well, and he had to have a specialized bottle, which we told the sheriff when he took the baby. He said, we don't need any bottles, we'll take care of it. They just took the baby, and they had no way to feed this baby. So they dropped the baby off with the, what do they call them?
The foster parents.
Foster parents. And the foster parent realized she didn't have a way to feed this baby. So the baby's immediately taken back within just a few hours back to the emergency room at Mayo Clinic and readmitted. So Mayo Clinic has no way to feed the baby because the baby only breastfeeds and works off from the specialized bottle that they didn't take with them. So they immediately put a nose tube back down the baby.
Oh, good
now,
Lord.
This nose tube has come and gone many times, and every time they do it, they have to take an X-ray to see that tube ended up in the right place. So this baby has had numerous X-rays at this point, and now they put the tube back down. It's 72 hours. We don't even know he was readmitted to the emergency room. Finally, on Wednesday the 23rd, we find out where he's at a hearing. That's the first hearing that we had, first contact we had with the judge. And at that point, only Lindsey and John can go see the baby. So they go see the baby. There's a lot of things that are happening all at once. I mean, I have a stack of papers that's 2 inches high of everything that was done to that baby after he was taken. Now, this is a completely healthy baby by Mayo Clinic standards, by his blood work, everything. He's completely healthy, but he's put onto these 3 drugs, and now they have generated a 2-inch stack of papers of what they've done to this baby, which includes 4 blood transfusions directly related to the AZT, the same thing that was killing Lindsey. The baby would pull that the feeding tube out of his nose, so he said, well, you know what, this is too much trouble, and besides that, he's already maxed out on x-rays, but they still give him x-rays to put it back in, so they said, we're going to put a G-tube in. Oh. So they cut a hole into the side of this baby's stomach to put this, so that they can feed him the meds and feed him formula through there. The G-tube leaks on both sides. They put it in wrong. So now we've got unknown debris floating through the system around all the organs with no way to get out. That baby, as of today, has a swollen stomach that would remind you of little African children that are starving to death, and it's as hard as a basketball when you touch it, and it's full of blue veins. 2 weeks ago, I got into it with one of the doctors there because the doctor said that this stomach was bloated because he was sucking so hard on his pacifier that his stomach would fill up with air. I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, that does not relate to anything I've ever witnessed in life. That's like blowing into a glass hard enough and keeping enough air into the glass that you can make the glass explode. They hung with that idea for 6 more days before they looked for infection. Now they're looking for infection. The kid's been on morphine. The kid has been on Oxycontin. He's been on numerous pain medications because of all of the operations that he's had.
I got to take a break here, guys. I'm going to explode. I am absolutely going to explode with rage as I hear this story. And, Steve, you're a big guy. I don't know how you're containing yourself here. They're trying to kill this baby. We've got to save Rico. SaveRico.com is the website. We're going to be back to wrap it up with Steve and Cheryl Nagel. Liam Scheff will chime in as well. Stand by.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
We're back in the Robert Scott Bell Show with the Nagel family relating the story of the kidnapping, torture, and attempted murder of their grandchild. I broke a story years ago about children being used in clinical trials in New York, and I mean, everybody knows it's true now, but at the time people couldn't believe they would cut an infant's stomach open to put a tube in to pump black box labeled drugs in it, but that's what's happened to Rico, their grandchild. Very hard to talk about. Steve, can you continue on and take us to where we are?
Well, Rico right now he's in pretty frail condition. It's he's basically laid on his back for his entire life and stared at a fluorescent light. They have just he's jousted constantly by doctors and nurses. I'm there. I'm not there a lot, but Lindsey and John are there all the time, and there's constantly nurses coming in and doing something to him, taking blood pressure, all of this stuff. So this poor little kid has just had, he's had a terrible life. The one thing that I try to keep the kids' spirits up, if you can keep your spirit up, is that this is the only life that Rico has ever known. So, it's in some respects it might be more torturous for us because we know there's a better life. Rico right now doesn't know that there's a better life out there. And we're doing, we're working around the clock, almost literally trying to give him this life. And more county officials, from the judge all the way down, have done everything possible. This judge could have kicked this out at any time. They have done everything possible to keep that child away from us. We have a final court hearing, at least final on this round, coming up April 1st and 2nd. I'm not very hopeful, except for what people, the outside public comes in. We've got SaveRico.com. There are links on there to our local officials. We're in a very rural area, so when they get tagged by emails or phone calls, you get a lot of mileage out of it. You wouldn't if you were in a metro area, but we're out in farm country here, and those people get scared. They've been pummeled with emails over the past week. The media blitz here is big. We just had, last night we had our big CBS affiliate in Minneapolis did a story We've got ABC locally doing a story tonight, and we have ABC affiliate up in the Twin Cities is coming back down again tomorrow. So they're getting a big squeeze right now, and they don't like it. And that's the only power that we have right now, because what's going to happen on the 1st and 2nd is we're going to take the same information back into the courtroom and have the final trial on this. So now we've got the same information, and it's going to be presented to the same judge. So to think we're going to get a different conclusion, I'm skeptical of that. But the public coming out and demanding something better out of this country and this county in particular, and these elected officials, is the only weapon that we have right now to save this child. And the child is in fragile condition. If he gets one more setback, I don't know that that he would pull through it. They may have already killed this child. He's just not dead yet.
Well, April 1st and 2nd, are you posting on SaveRico.com exactly where it will be? Because there may be listeners in the Midwest up there, or people willing to travel from far to be there, to put pressure on them, to call, to email, to do everything to save this baby's life if it is at all possible.
Yes, there will be a lot more information coming up on SaveRico.com this week regarding the trial that will be on April 1st and 2nd. There's already a what can we do tab on Rico.com, SaveRico.com, and if you click on that, it's going to give you the email addresses to every one of the commissioners in this county who pay for these people to go out and abscond with children. And our 2 state representatives are on there, and there may be a couple others. There's only about 6 or 7 people that we've got listed on there, but they are the people that oversee the people that are doing this to this little baby right now.
How far are you from the Twin Cities there?
We're about 100 miles south.
So that's the area where the trial would actually be held?
Yes, it'll be in Moore County. So we're about 6 miles north of the Iowa border.
Okay. Listen, I'm just held speechless, because the only speech I want to do it's not nice, what I want to say.
No, it's the one I've been rehearsing for months now.
Right. I mean, any parent out there that can imagine if they were going through this, much less a grandparent, you'd seemingly be well within your rights to visit violence upon these criminals. And yet you have maintained, to the greatest degree you can, some level of composure. But these people are operating in ways that it just reminded me, as you were telling the story earlier, I thought right to Liam and your story about the ICC and what you witnessed when they opened up and put the G-tube in.
They kill babies. That's what they do. It's the AIDS establishment. They take healthy babies and they take sick babies and they kill them. And they collect money and they put red ribbons on it, and you go to Starbucks and you buy a coffee that has a red ribbon, and you buy a U2 album that has Bono talking about the poor Africans who have a sex disease, and they kill babies. That's what you pay for. And that's how they claim victory. It's a murder-suicide cult. And gay men in the big cities are trapped in it, whether they understand it or not. I just had a long conversation with a man last night who's really coming to understand what the so-called gay community of Los Angeles is. It's a suicide club. And these guys come in and they have no self-esteem because they've been beaten up their entire high school lives. They get into this world. They take so many drugs. They go to the gym all the time. They don't eat right. And they go and get tested when they come out of the party, and whatever those are called, the clubs. They're vans, mobile vans, waiting to test them. Tag and test. They're like animals. And they caught Lindsey. They should have thrown her back. This is going to hurt them in the long run. If they bloody well kill this child, this is going to hurt them immensely, because nobody's going to forget it. No. Nobody's going to forget what's happening here. This isn't a confusing case. This isn't a lifelong drug addict. This was a healthy child. They made a mistake with Lindsey, and if they had just thrown her back, but they're not that smart, if they had just said we were wrong, we were a false positive, they would have let themselves off the hook. But if they don't, I swear to God, everybody's going to remember this.
Yes. Steve, Cheryl, our hearts go out to you. Our love, all the love to Lindsey and John and to Baby Rico. Our prayers as well. And we will follow up with you on this. This is why we do this on the Robert Scott Bell Show. I mean, we cover stories all the time, but this is as human and as personal a story as I've ever had to cover with you all. And as we go into the weekend, the healing revolution will be when we no longer look at children as disease or, let's just say, drug receptacles based on a non-specific, cross-reactive, non-standardized test of any kind. And blessings to you guys. Please stay in touch. I know we will, and we'll be following this up in the next days, weeks, and months, hopefully, as this baby recovers, as Baby Rico strengthens. Guys, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Robert.
All right, SaveRico.com. Check it out. We'll be back to give you updates as we can, but go ahead and sign up there and find out what can you do and do it. Liam Scheff, bless you, my friend. Thank you for being here and helping out with this. Despite all of this, the God's honest truth is indeed that the power to heal is still yours.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.